Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome to our WWEW Women Who Encourage Women podcast. And today we're going to be talking about grief. And the reason we're talking about
Mm.
grief today is because in our community, the brown and black community, I feel like as people, not just women, we don't talk about grief enough and the effects that it may have on us physically, mentally, or emotional. And today I have with me Hilda Wright, and she is going to be sharing her experience with grief on today. And so, the first thing we want to do is to just go ahead and define grief. So, Hilda, can you just define grief in your own words?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Hilda Wright. Um, so grief to me is a loss of a loved one, or maybe not even somebody that you love like that, but somebody that you know. I feel that's what grief is. When they pass away, it's a loss. It's a big loss. So I think that's what grief is, and yeah, that's what I believe grief is. A loss, a death
Okay. And
of a
so,
loved one.
thank you for sharing that. So, according to research, it says that grief is a response to a loss. There are several aspects of grief. So, there's emotional, physical, social, cognitive reactions as well. And it's a deep distress after a loss, specifically a death. So, there can be other types of grief, like if you lose a friendship, you lose a marriage, but the grief that we're going to be spending some time talking about over the next couple of episodes would be grief as a result of a death. And I think that's really
Mhm.
important. Hilda and I are both Christians, and I think it's important to say that because sometimes people feel like as Christians, we shouldn't experience grief. But the reality is,
Right,
everyone experiences grief.
right,
The
right,
only difference is that we don't allow the grief to consume us, but that doesn't mean that
right.
we don't physically, emotionally, or mentally experience grief.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
thank you. And so talk about your most recent um loss that you've had and the
So the
grief
most,
you're experiencing.
so of course in 2020 during the pandemic, um, I lost my dad, and me and my dad were very, very close. That when I say close, I mean glues. Me and my dad were close. You see me, you see daddy. See my daddy, you see me. And he passed away unexpectedly in 2020 during the pandemic. That to me was, I used to always say, I don't know what I would do if my dad was to ever pass because me and my dad were so, so close. But since he's passed away, I hurt. I feel sad. I have my days and stuff, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. It's not as bad as I thought it would be. Um, I don't know what it is, but there's this peace that I have that's unexplainable sometimes. But I do miss my dad a lot. I think about him sometimes. My dad used to always be in my house. He always come to my house and everything. So it feels a little weird and different since he's not around anymore. So, um, there's certain things that or music that I hear, just different things that reminds me of my dad. But like I said, I thought I would be like devastated and don't know what to do with myself and going through like a deep depression, locking myself in a room and all of that stuff. But to God be the glory, that hasn't happened.
Amen.
I just try to take things day by day and I always ask God to give me peace and comfort. And I think that's the number one thing. You got to pray to God and ask Him to give you that. Because I think once you're at peace and you have that comfort, it makes it a little easier when you're grieving.
I agree with you 100%. I think that's what keeps me the peace of God that passeth all understanding. They say will keep your heart and mind in him. But what are the emotional effects of grief on your life? Like emotionally, how has that affected you? Because we have the peace of God, but I don't know about
Right.
you. I can tell you that I feel sometimes it's not as bad as it used to be, but I felt like
Right.
in the beginning, like I feel like I was on an emotional roller coaster. Can you identify with
Mm,
that? Can you share what you feel emotionally as you're going through your grieving process? Like, how has that
yes.
been for you?
Emotionally, I have my days. I'm not gonna say I don't have my days. I do have my days. I have my days when I'm very sad, and sometimes I just want to be alone. So I'll just like either go in my room and just sit there quietly, or even in the shower. Like I'll be in the shower, I'll think about my dad, and I'm not gonna lie, I'll cry in the shower. Because I miss my daddy. But you know, thank God it's not something that's like long term where I'm like locking myself in a room for days and all of that type of stuff. But it's just that peace and quiet that I have when I just go in my room and just sit there, and maybe I'll shed a tear or two for my dad. And, I'll even speak like, Dad, I miss you. I miss you a lot. I don't know if you can hear me, but I miss you. But I do have my day of being sad. I do have my day of even being angry sometimes. Like, why does my daddy have to go? You know? But yeah, that's how I've been feeling. Just sad and sometimes, you know, I don't want to say depressed. I don't want to even speak that in the atmosphere, but just that down feeling sometimes because you miss your loved ones and you're so used to them being around that it's hard sometimes. But I always pray to God, like I said, to give me that peace of mind and that comfort, regardless.
Do you ever feel like sometimes that people really don't understand the effects that grief have has had on your life?
Yes, yes. I don't think people understand. I think people have to go through it to really get it, especially the ones that haven't really gone through that type of situation. Um, Sometimes some people don't really know what to say when you're grieving to you. And it's like, okay, you just gotta be like, all right, whatever. But um, yeah, yeah.
What are some things that or some cliche things that people have said to you while you're going through your grief and you thought to yourself like, did she really just say that or did he really just say that to me?
Oh boy. Sometimes God knows best. Oh, it's for the best. Oh, that's not the best for me. My daddy's not here. You know what I'm saying? Um, and sometimes you just gotta be like, you know what? You just gotta not take it personal because sometimes people just don't know what to say when they're talking to you or whatever. But it's hard. It's tough. It's not easy. It's a day by day process. You have to always. You don't
What
know
do
what to
you
expect each day when it comes to it.
what do you think would have been helpful for them to say or to do instead of
Some people that you expect to be there for you are not really there for you like you expect them to.
so you expect
I
somebody
expected you to call me to see how I'm doing. You okay? Is everything okay with you? What's going on with you? You good?
you
Some,
needing
especially the ones that you expect to do it, don't do it. But the
just
ones that you
checking in.
least expect to do it
Yeah.
are
Or
the
just
ones that do it.
check in like, hey, I'm checking on you. Yeah.
Right. Check on the person. Just call to see how they're doing. Or hey, you want me to come by, come keep you company, or just sit down and chill with you, with you, something. Right.
You're now I just want to put a disclaimer out there. We're both from a Caribbean background and we're speaking from our experience. We're not speaking for the community on a whole. So
Mhm.
Hilda is from a Ghanaian background. And so
Mhm.
think about your culture and what you've been experiencing. Do you feel like there have been a huge support with your community, or do you feel like um you felt like, okay, your community should have surrounded you a little more, but you felt like instead it was like after everything was over, it was like, where is everyone? Like, what was your experience with all that?
So my experience, so with Ghanaian community, when it comes to like death and stuff like that, that's like a big thing in our culture. It's a very big thing. They do call to check on you to see how you're doing and stuff like that. When it comes to stuff like that, they celebrate. I mean, not celebrate, but they mourn the person, but they do it in a happy way where you're celebrating, people are dancing, they have their traditions and stuff like that. But I feel like they're supportive. They're supportive. But then you have a few that's not so supportive, but they're very supportive. When it comes to the Ghanaian culture with death, they're supportive. They're supportive. I have to say
Okay.
they are.
Well, so far it sounds like you've experienced a number of the stages of grief. Like I heard you mention um anger. I heard you
Hmm.
mention like the shock of it, like
Yeah.
wow, this really happened type of thing.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you might have even experienced some acceptance issue, right? Wow, my
Yes.
dad really gone? You know? Um,
I
did it
have.
really happen? Like, no, not my daddy, you know? And so there's 7 stages of grief, and they don't necessarily come in the same order. They're not a chronological order. And I just want to put a disclaimer out there that every person that experience grief will experience grief in a very different way based on their relationship with the person that they lost. Let me say that again.
Yes.
Every
Yes.
person's grief as a result
Hmm.
of a loss is going to be based on their relationship that they had with that person. All right. So I lost my mom a year ago, and Hilda lost her dad 3 years ago. Does that mean I'm mourning more than Hilda? No. She was closer to
No.
her dad than her mom. And who am I to say because it's my mother that I'm grieving more? No. I can't say that because I don't know what she is experiencing. So everyone's experience with grief is going to be different. So someone else might have lost their mom as well, but maybe you lost your mom at 5 and you only remembered her for 5 years. Am I going to say
Right.
that my grief is more? I'm going to say my grief is different because for 44 years, I've had my mother, and I've had 44 years to build a relationship to take care of my mother. And so I had a longer time period with my mother. So my grief is going to be different. So as we talked about before, where Hilda said that, we don't really fault people when they say things, but sometimes it's better off just saying, you know what, my prayers are with you, I'm thinking of you, I'll check on you, I'm here if you need me. But when you say, oh, I know what you're going through, girl, I lost my mother too, you may not know what I'm going through because you're not walking
Hmm.
in my shoes, because you may not have had to take care of your mother on her dying bed. You may not have been the person that have seen that was the last person to see their mother. You might have not been the last person to braid her hair or paint her nails or do anything for her the day before she died. So you can't say I know how you feel because you're not walking in that person's shoe. So we just have to
Right.
be very sensitive enough to say, you know what? I'll check on you. I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you, rather than saying, oh, I know what you're going through. Oh, I know how you feel. Oh, God is going to get you through it. Yeah, God is going to get me through it. He's going to help me through this process, but I'm never going to get over my mother dying because I'm always going to miss my mother.
Right.
Oh, with time, it'll get easier. So with time, I'm going to forget about my mother. She's gonna forget about her father? No. It's just that we
Oh.
keep on living. We learn a new way of living this new journey without the person that we loved in our lives. So we have to be very
Right.
careful and sensitive enough when someone's experiencing a grief not to say cliche things. You're better off saying to that person, you know what? Again, I'm here for you. If you
Right.
need anything, I'm a phone call away, or I'm
Right.
going to call you and I'm going to check on you. If you need someone to be there for you, I'll just be there for you.
Right.
But don't get in the habit of saying little cliche things, thinking that it's gonna make the person that is experiencing the grief feel better, because they're not. You're not making them feel better. Sometimes they actually feel
Right.
worse. And while we know that it's not personal, but in
Mhm.
that moment, because we are hurting, because we are in pain, because we are experiencing that grief, that is the last thing that I want to hear, is that I'm going to get over my mother dying, who's been there for me for 44 years and I've been taking care of her. That's the last thing I want to hear. The last thing I want to hear is that, oh, God knew best, so he took your mother. God, what? You killed my mother? What? That's the last thing that I want to hear is that God took my mother. We know that God is sovereign, and we know that God did not want to take away my mother's choice. My mother was tired, and so I believe that it was my mother who desired that, you know what, God, if it's my time, it's my time. She didn't want to fight anymore. And so
Right.
after I process that aspect of it, then I let go of that anger stage of grief. But no one wants to
And
hear when they're going through that God took their parent, or God took their child, or God took, no one wants to hear that. You're better off just saying, I'm here for you. Whatever you need, I'll be there. I'm a shoulder. If you need me to come and sit, I'll come and sit. But we have to be sensitive enough to understand that when people are going through grief, they might be going through shock. Did this really happen? Denial. I don't believe it. I
right.
planned my mother's funeral, and sometimes I'm still like, I gotta call my mother at 7, and then I'm like, no, 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 no. You planned the funeral. She's not here anymore. I gotta walk myself through it in my own mind. So there's shock, there's denial, there's pain at times, there's guilt, depending on the relationship. There could be
Mhm.
anger. We don't. I thank God I haven't experienced depression, or the grief has not consumed me, thank God, because of the peace of God. But some people do experience deep depression.
Yeah.
Some people experience the acceptance after a while, and then they go through the hope process, right? And then there's the reconstruction and the working through, right? And sometimes I feel like I'm at that reconstruction and working through it and figuring out my new normal. And then bam, I'm right back to that denial stage. So, it's a constant, sometimes you're going through the stage in cycles, because there are different triggers. Maybe I smelt something that smelled like her. Maybe I heard a song that she loves, or maybe
Mhm.
I her favorite dish is being cooked somewhere, or somebody said a phrase that reminded me of her, you know?
Mhm.
So there are different stages, there are different cycles. So we just want to be sensitive enough as people of God to understand that people are going to experience grief, and we need to allow them to experience their grief, because sometimes we also try to rush people to their grieving process.
Right. And my thing is, I don't think nobody can tell you how you should feel. Nobody shouldn't be telling you how you should feel, because everybody's grieving
Alone.
process is different. I think mine's and yours is similar because we both took care of our parents while they were sick. I took care of my dad. I was with him. I was feeding him. I saw my dad standing there one week, fine, walking around. I took him to the bank. We was chilling and everything. The next week, he's fighting for his life, and I'm the one taking care of my dad. There was no ambulance, no anything around. Everything was chaotic. And when I finally get an ambulance to pick up my dad, I just knew that that was it. I wasn't going to see my daddy again. I
And
wasn't going to feel him again. I wasn't going to physically see him anymore. I don't know why they came over, and I was highly disappointed. I think I called you right after he got in
Yeah.
the ambulance, and I was crying my eyes out because I was like, I did everything I can, and like the guilt kind of sunk into me. Like, did I do something wrong when my daddy is not, when my daddy has to go to the hospital? What could I have done where this doesn't happen? I wish my daddy could be here with me, but unfortunately, he had to go to the hospital.
And I just
You
want
know,
to, this was in
so
the height of COVID. So this is why
yeah,
she felt like, oh snap, if daddy goes, daddy's not gonna come back. But it
right,
was totally and utterly out of your hands. Because I remember, and he was
yeah,
just getting worse and worse. And I remember I said to you, I said, Hill, you don't want anything to happen to him in your home. You gotta call
right,
911 because we're not gonna go into what was happening with the doctors and the ambulances.
right,
For those of you who've gone through situations very similar during COVID. It was a very tough time where these essential workers, everybody did the best that they could at that moment. So we won't even get into that. But it came down to the point where Hilda didn't have no choice and she sent him. And I remember that phone call. And I remember you broke down and I remember feeling like, what could I do to help? And we all feel like that when our friends and our loved ones are experiencing any type of despair, we all feel like, how could I help that person? And so
yeah,
in the spirit of wanting to help, we often sometimes say certain things that is not really fitting for that situation. And what I've learned through my own experiences is better for you to not to say anything or to just say, you know what, I'm here. And if you remember, Hilda, I think after my mom died, I called you and I apologized, remember?
yeah, you did.
I apologized for the silly things that I said because I didn't know any better. I said what I heard everybody say when someone is grieving. You know, God knows best. You know,
Mhm.
you'll get, with time, you know, it'll be easier. With time you'll get, I don't think I said you'll get over it, but I was like, with time it'll be better, you know? And it's not until something, you're experiencing something similar that you could say, whoa, I don't want to forget about my mother. So no,
Right,
I'll learn how to live with the fact that she's not here, but I'm not gonna get over my mother not being here because I want my mother to be here, you know? But
right.
I'm learning how to cope and to deal with my new normal. And so I remember calling Hilda and I was like, yo, I apologize for some silly things that I said because now that I think about it, it was like, really, Kate? But I said what I heard other people say, and I realized that it was important for us to get this message out because when people are hurting, they just need you to show up. The bottom line is we need to show up for our people when they're in
Mhm.
deep despair and when they're in deep sorrow. Make a dish, lighten their load. Sometimes we're like, oh, I'll pray for you. Offer to come and clean their house. Because the last thing I wanted to do when I was going through grief was to clean my doggone house. I'm not gonna lie to you. The last thing I wanted to do was to make a meal. So as a result of it, I remember I gained about 20 pounds after my mother died because it was like, you know what? Felix, I am not cooking today. Let's just order something because I couldn't even be bothered with cooking. And I wasn't depressed. I was still doing everything else. But that was just the one
Mhm.
last thing I didn't want to worry about. My house was clean. So
Right.
the house is clean. I'm not cooking. So it's like, pick your choice. You want a dirty house or you want me to cook? But I just couldn't handle doing both. I could not
Right.
handle doing both initially. So make a meal for someone. Drop it off. Hey, here's a casserole. I know you might have some. And then
Yeah.
the other thing is, what about the affairs? Right? What about the affairs that you got to deal with afterwards, right? So there's a lot of different things that you're dealing with. There are a lot of moving pieces. But the next time we meet, we'll talk more about taking care of their affairs after they're gone. So not only some of
It's a
us
hard
that that are going through grief, we had to deal with taking care of our parents when they were sick, but then some of us also had to deal with the aftermath. We have to deal with handling their fears, closing out their fears, all these
Planning
different
out their
other
funeral
things,
and all that type of stuff. That's
managing
another part of it
dealing
that's
with your
hard.
siblings, there's a lot of different dealing with family during grief. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different moving pieces that are going on that can be very emotional and
Mhm.
physically taxing on people who are going through grief at the moment. But so like I said, make a casserole, make a dish, show up. Hey, I'm just here for you. You need me to run a vacuum, or if you need me to just sit with you, I'll just sit with you. You need a shoulder to
So do
cry
you
on.
remember when your mom passed? You remember the day your mom passed? I think we were already gonna have a gathering anyway, remember? And
Yeah.
that was the same day that your mom passed away. And I said, I made my famous jollof rice. But I said, Key, should we just cancel? Or do you want us to still come over there? And he said, you guys please come over.
Yes.
You ain't have to say no more. I remember that very vividly.
Yeah. And you guys showed up.
And we showed
You guys
up.
showed up. You guys showed up, and I thank God for that. And yeah, a couple of my circle would just show up and just sit with me, and we would share like either good memories of mom, or we would just sit
Mhm,
sometimes and like hello, but
mhm.
it meant the world to me that you guys showed up, and I could never even express, like, I don't know how people go through grief alone, but if you have anyone out there that is grieving, or anyone that you know out there that's grieving, that doesn't have a lot of family members, that doesn't have a close-knit circle, please reach out to them and go and check on them and just go see about them, because the showing up makes a difference. Just to know that,
Yeah.
what, I am not going at this alone. I might feel like I'm alone going through it, but I'm not alone. It made a world of difference. But I want to thank you guys for tuning in to WWECW, Women Who Encourage Women podcast. And we will see you again with our next episode. We're dealing with grief. God bless you.
God bless you guys.